All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Job, and I am your host for today's webinar. We are here today as part of Marketech APAC's What's Next series. What's Next 2023 is a 4-month-long festival of knowledge-sharing activities where we gather top marketing leaders in the industry to share their predictions and insights on the latest trends in marketing. Earlier this month, we've talked about what's next in event marketing and influencer marketing. And today, we are thrilled to continue with What's Next series with What's Next 2023 Metaverse Marketing Activations in Asia Pacific. The Metaverse is undoubtedly a hype-up trend in the marketing industry in today's time, and brands have turned to explore the vast opportunities offered in Web3, creating Metaverse marketing activations to stay ahead of the competition. Today, we will be discussing how to be on top of our game in the immersive virtual space. Alongside some of the best minds in the industry, we're going to deep dive into what has been done, what was deemed effective and not, and what can we do more, right, to keep our consumers engaged as we look into the future of Metaverse marketing activations. We're glad that we're hosting this timely and interesting webinar and would like to thank our partner, Talkwalker. Talkwalker is a consumer intelligence platform dedicated to helping brands close the gap between brand and consumer. Now, I am pleased to introduce you our presenter for today. He is Benjamin Subis, Managing Director for APAC and Japan at Talkwalker. He advises organizations on best practices in monitoring, measuring, and analyzing online conversations. Now, fun fact about Ben, you won't believe it, is that he still sleeps with his lion plush toy and brought it with him all the way from Europe. What a lucky plush toy there. So, well, today, Ben will talk about the sentiment of the consumers toward the metaverse. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, very good, Joel. And hello, everyone. Glad to be here. And indeed, the lions are with me. If they were in the metaverse, that wouldn't be enough for me, right? That wouldn't make me happy. I need the physical presence, right? But yeah, glad to be here today. Glad to be this topic, discussing this very hot, engaging topic today with you.
Absolutely. And before I give you the floor, I have one question. What was the first thing that came to mind when you heard about the metaverse?
Well, futuristic, clearly. Originally, that was the thing, a bit of the unknown, dystopian kind of thing. But of course, I think futuristic was really the first thing that came to mind when we're discussing about potentially doing this webinar. This is always something that has been with me, right? Are we there yet? When are we going to be there? What's going to happen? Very exciting anyway. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Ben. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Joven. And again, hello, everyone. Glad to be here, really, to discuss this topic. There's an exciting lineup also of experts also after in a very exciting panel. What I'll do now for the next 15, 20 minutes, we'll talk about the metaverse, a bit what people have been saying up until now around this topic and also in the region. We'll look at some potential predictions, coming from some research organizations. And then we'll be looking at what could be the impact for brands. Well, we all representing a brand, all marketers, comms, business development, product strategy, whatever the department we work in. It's all about, how can we get our brand closer to our consumer, right? And the metaverse is there. A lot of people are talking about this, but how can we potentially leverage that opportunity for our own benefit, right? And our own companies. And then we'll try to look at what some brands have done in the region, right? And looking at maybe some of their takeaways, right? Some of the little cues that we could use, should we decide to plan a campaign or plan a metaverse project. I've personally always been very interested in that topic, right? I've done a couple of media interviews around this. You're welcome to look for them. And why is it relevant for Talkwalker, right? So Talkwalker, we're really at deep listening. We're a deep research company, right? What we believe in is that companies, brands, communication, and consumers should go hand in hand, right? We call it consumer closeness, and this should be a driver for the business growth. And then personally, I believe the metaverse could be a new platform, right? A new platform for brands to engage their consumers, right? And try to get closer to them, offering them new experiences, offering them new way to interact, as long as, of course, the right consumer engagement strategy in place, right? And the right consumer engagement strategy is really one that keeps the audience, the consumer, and the insights around them really at the center of the strategy. So before we go in depth into the topic, right, of how we can engage maybe, our communities in the metaverse, what are people saying, right? So here what we wanted to do and to show is to look at maybe some people that are a bit, let's say, critical or a bit wary of the metaverse, right? Here what we can see is some people that are getting tired already of hearing about the metaverse. What they say is that, well, come on, there's a lot far more important topics that are more fundamental to our well-being than the metaverse. Why are we talking about it that much? Why is it that important? And it's quite interesting to see it from that angle, right? Especially over the last month, a lot of world events, have happened, right? And we can definitely see what those people are saying around this. But on the other end of the spectrum, we see some people that have been extremely active from the get-go, already trying, to immerse themselves into the metaverse, and try new things. And so here, what we can see, supporters more of the metaverse. We see people that got married, right? In Singapore, locally here, I think it got so much media attention, something that I definitely recommend everyone to look for if you haven't read about it when it happened back in September. But they said yes, they say I do, on the metaverse. They were the first one to do it in the region. Some things that is definitely fun, very different. And what we see is also other people that are saying that on the metaverse, Web3, what those possibilities offer us is maybe to create connections that are even further engaging, potentially creating an emotional connection between all of us in a way that we couldn't necessarily do up until now. So what do we see from those examples? And how could this be important and relevant to us as brands? So what we see is that a lot of people, of course, like in every topic, like in every new thing, people have different expectations. They will have different aspirations when it comes to the metaverse, what it is, what it consists of, what it could be, what it could mean, potential risks, potential opportunities. So we'll have people that strongly believe in the opportunities that the metaverse holds for everyone. And then businesses will see it as an opportunity to get closer to the consumer or potentially attract, people that are not yet their customer. But there are clearly also people that believe that the metaverse is a fad, or maybe something that is not that relevant at this moment, something that we should be a bit maybe concerned with, wary of. And so the question is that which one holds the majority of people? People exciting, people waiting for us to communicate there, to have campaigns, to have projects on there, or is it people that are a bit more critical, right? And this is what matters for us as brands, right? We need to understand, who at the moment the supporters are. Only the gamers? Are they only the Gen Z, or could this be applicable, to other type of consumer groups? And so before we go into what it could mean also for the brands really to understand where its audience sits, we have a little poll for you. The question is, do you agree that the metaverse will significantly impact your commercial and personal lives, right? It's a single choice, right? It's basically either you agree, you disagree, or you don't really know yet. Looking at it myself, and from what I've seen, some of the work we do with some clients, or looking at where the industry is going, definitely I would click on agree, right? I think that will significantly impact our commercial and personal lives. We'll see the extent. There's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of processes that haven't been properly thought of yet, and that we'll have to look for first, right? So here, where are we standing today, right? At least in the audience, I believe I saw quickly it was close to 60% agreeing. Yes, still a lot of neutral, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are just wondering, they don't know yet, and they're waiting to see maybe a bit more. It sounds maybe to some exciting, to some it sounds a bit less exciting and potentially something that they should be concerned with. But clearly, at least the majority of people, 6 out of 10, believe that it will have a significant impact. And so before we go deeper into what it means for brands and looking at what some of those brands have been doing already on the metaverse, what we see here from McKinsey, that report, again, I recommend everyone, to try to look at it, right? It's in the value creation report by McKinsey. So we see the varying views from individuals. Us personally have all our opinion. What they see here and what they very smartly, actually look at is what could it mean for the economy, the global economy, right? And so they predict that it could potentially add up to 5 trillion to the value of the global economy by 2030, right? So in 8 years. And actually what they highlight, and this is where it's super interesting, is that next year, 2023, will be the critical year in defining whether or not this prediction will pan out. Why is that? We think and we see that eventually the possibilities for the brands on the metaverse, as we see it today, are potentially endless, right? There's numerous opportunities to experiment, numerous opportunities to innovate in the space, but we don't know yet a lot of it, and we don't know yet exactly how we're going to engage our communities and how engaged they will be should we decide to go in there, right? So what does it mean for us? What does it mean for the brands, right? We know they're supporters, they're detractors, as with everything. But what we need to see is what does it mean for your audience, your consumer, and your customers? Where does your audience sit into that game, into that reflection? This is something that you absolutely need to understand. We believe that the key to the brands and to the marketers' success next year, so in 2023, when it comes to activating or not in their metaverse campaigns and projects, will be actually how well they understand their consumer communities, how these communities are engaging in the metaverse, and what are the best ways for me as a brand to create a relevant experience that actually resonates with my community. Why is it so important to understand what the communities mean? Is that we know that now communities kind of own a part of the brand, but out of the brand scope. They could be your advocates, they could be your detractors. And so acknowledging their presence is absolutely the first step, and then trying to find a way to engage them and make them resonate with your content. It's something that could actually make a very successful campaign and project. And so in order to do this, consumer insights, audience insights, right, are absolutely critical for the brands that wish to create an authentic, and authenticity, as we know today, is absolutely key into communicating with the audience today, right? So it needs to be authentic, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be personalized, right, for your brand community. And so in order to better understand a bit how it could look, right, we use our software, actually, our consumer intelligence tool, to analyze very quickly and very briefly the metaverse-related topic and conversation in Asia Pacific over the past year, right? In order to understand what are consumers saying in relation to the metaverse. And so what we see here very briefly, you can see it's 6 million conversation in Asia Pac mentioning or around the metaverse. And that's over the past year. We see a lot of engagement, we see a lot of activity, we see that actually the conversation, there's some spikes, then it goes down, and then it drifts off a bit down again before going back up. We see there's one big peak at some point in August 2022, right? That's actually the Blackpink concert, right, that has peaked. We know they've done a project on the metaverse, they've done a performance there, and there's been so much chatter about this, and we'll talk about more after that. But when you see this, you can actually predict now today, with the tools available to you, you can actually predict whether or not those conversations will continue to increase or at some point decrease. And we can see that in November, there's a lot of mentions that are expected to be created, a lot of content that is expected to be there around the metaverse. If we go one level, we drill down one level, well, we looked overview, 6 million conversation, but what are those conversations about, right? What are the hotspots in those metaverse conversations? And what we see here is that we clustered together all those conversations in order to appear the ones that were actually talking about the same thing. And what do we see here? And I think for people following a bit the metaverse, it will make sense. We see gaming, we see crypto, we see NFTs, we see K-pop, right? Again, coming back to Blackpink, we see fashion, we see music, we see shopping, right? Those are really the hot top conversation in Asia around the metaverse over the past year. So when it comes to actual looking at it, another lens, right? What are the events that actually created a lot of media attention, had a lot of media attention, or created a lot of content? Those are those main events, right? I won't go too much into detail. I strongly recommend you to go look further about this, but it's Polka War, it's Space Falcon, it's the Metaverse Oculus. This one is super interesting because it's actually people in Indonesia condemning the Indonesian government for investing into the Oculus instead of investing in what they thought were far pressing needs that they had in the country, right? And then that Blackpink concert, right? It's basically, so the K-pop girl band, they won an award at the VMAs, right, for the best metaverse performance, and that's why it created so much chatter, right? So now that we look and what we see, what people have been talking about, in APAC, around the metaverse, we know, how can we engage? What is potentially relevant to the communities? We know that potentially, if we think about a partnership with a gaming or a crypto company, or potentially fashion company, or some kind of artist, this could actually win big in the metaverse because we know the community is already there talking about this, right? So it's how can you leverage existing conversation, existing insights in order to populate your content strategy should you go into this. And so here further on that, right, we see what are the brands that have been very, very present, when it comes to people talking about the metaverse, right? And those are the ones that are winning. And after this, I will show you 2 examples of brands that have actually gone very strongly into the metaverse with very exciting project, right? Here we see, so a lot of logos that a lot of people know. I'll highlight two here, if you don't mind. So the McDonald's one, why a lot of conversation about this is because they plan to open a store in the metaverse, right? So looking forward to seeing what it's going to look like and what can actually be done there. And then Walmart, right? They partnered with Roblox, right? Which is the gaming platform, in order to create an immersive experience for their shoppers. So now, going deeper into an example that will talk to a lot of the audience, especially the one in Singapore and I hope the one in the region, what DBS has done. So they partnered with Sandbox. And what they did is that they launched an interactive metaverse experience, showcasing the importance of building a better, more sustainable world, right? And they invited a lot of people to come alongside to participate. So what DBS is doing is that they will acquire a plot of land, right, in Sandbox. So the plot of land is actually a virtual real estate, right, in the Sandbox metaverse, right? And so on that lot of virtual real estate, they will develop immersive elements. And so it will use that platform, and that's where it becomes super interesting. They will use that platform to profile social entrepreneurs in Asia who have been driving through their business innovation, positive impact through their business innovation, but also through their business models. DBS will also explore opportunities to showcase Better World with its Live Better platform that was launched just last October in order to encourage eco-conscious living around its customers. And I think that's super interesting because they're gonna clearly tap on a new community, on potentially new customers that are out of their maybe more traditional customers. So again, I recommend you looking at this. Here, if I could summarize, for everybody's attention, the key features of this campaign and why we think, that it was a winning one. The first one is that they advocate sustainability, right? We know it's a hot topic, especially in Singapore, and DBS want to be at the front run of that. The second is that there's gamification. They invite people to collaborate. There are immersive elements to it. It's fun, you can participate. Gamification in the consumer journey, right? Extremely important. And also, and finally, they allow their users to gain potentially real-life benefits through their action in the virtual world. So whatever people will do on the Better World, on the Live Better platform, will actually have an impact into real life, right? And I think this is extremely, extremely interesting, and congrats to DBS for doing that. Another one, also, this time in the fashion, so it's the Charles & Keith, Singaporean fashion house, right? What they did, they participated in the first Metaverse Fashion Week, right, on Decentraland. It was in March of this year, I think March 24 to 27, 2022, right? Charles & Keith, also the first Singaporean fashion label to implement cryptocurrency as a payment on their e-commerce website, right? And so what they did through this initiative, we've seen avatars of their customers could actually go into the different pop-ups that you can imagine there, to view the Brand Spring 2022 campaign, right? They could see the video, they can try on digital, of course, wearable, similar kind of experience as going to a physical store. And that was super well received by the people, a lot of media attention. Here, I think the two key features, there's a crypto tie-up, right? Decentraland, right? Also extremely relevant for the audience, for the community today. It's very smart of them doing that. And then the second part is that phygital, right? As much as I said earlier today that I need my lions to be physically, and phygital wouldn't be enough for me. When it comes to shopping, when it comes to fashion, and those creating those new experiences, phygital is clearly a winner, right? Because it has kind of a real life relevance to the consumers. So what we see here, what are the key features of the Metaverse brand campaigns? We see that they promote community building, they promote social interaction, they're creating a phygital experience, ensuring that there's some real life impact to whatever is done virtually, right? And then there's ties up with crypto or with gaming platforms, right? And this is really why it's a winning and why we wanted to highlight those two. So we've seen the crypto one. Now, why gaming specifically? Well, gaming has always been extremely present into creating virtual worlds where we can fully immerse ourselves, playing avatar and all that, right? Everybody can imagine what gaming has always been at the center. Why is it smart to partner or to imagining partnering with them? Is that the brands actually, you would be able to tap into an existing community that is already in the virtual reality, that is already used to it, that will give you insights into what works, what should be done, or what doesn't work. You can actually also drive brand love, people appreciating your brand, people loving what you're doing on the virtual reality by tapping onto that community engagement that is extremely strong. The engagement from those communities is one of the highest that we see. And then finally, you can drive authenticity, right? You can drive ownership through user-generated content, because at some point, what you will do will be taken over by the community. And so with all those elements and all those developments that we can see here, I just wanted to highlight something to tie it back to the first slide about the detractors, the supporters. Here's a quote for an industry expert, a partner at Accenture Song, Neeraj Gulati. So here it's really focusing on the possibility that the metaverse offers to go deeper into how we're connected. We can now create live shared experiences where we are fully immersed, fully together, we're connected, right? And completely relieved from the physical limitations. And so finally, before I let you go and before we start listening to the exciting panel that we have for all of you, just some of the key pillars, right? For everybody, for all of us potentially, looking at what we've discussed today, what could be some takeaways, some pillars in order to start thinking about how we could effectively engage our communities in the metaverse. The first step, critical, you need to identify your target community. You need to understand what they think, what they feel, and what they do in relation to the metaverse. In order for you to create the right content, the one that is relevant, authentic, and that will then create the right experience for them, meaning that they will actually take your brand afterwards and make it something positive on the metaverse through user-generated content. The next pillar is to learn from your peers. Look at what your competitors are doing. Look at their campaigns. Look at their projects. We'll see, especially next year, more and more industry players launch their own metaverse campaign. Observe what they're doing and how their consumers are responding. Always think about, you have your customers, you have your repeated customers. This is the ones that we always want. But what about the ones that are not yet yours? How can you attract them? How can you talk to them? Well, look at what your competitors are doing. And then the third step and final step is to ensure that you always have access to audience consumer insights that should be as real time as you can. And there's possibility offered by technology today in order to that around the metaverse, around the hot topics, around the brands that are the more prominent in there. Because as more players join in the game, it is extremely important to leverage consumer insights in order to identify the most promising opportunities in the metaverse that you should be investing in. You can find also much more about this. We published every year, we publish what we call our social media trends. The one for 2023 is out already. It's done in partnership with Koros. We talk about the metaverse. We have so many dozens of industry experts across the world that have contributed to that report. I'm giving you a couple of seconds just to scan that QR code and to download that report. You'll see much more content around the metaverse, but also what are the different trends in social media that you should be aware of as a marketer, as a professional in PR, communication, product strategy, in order to plan for next year. And with that, thank you very much to everyone. It's glad to be with you here today. Of course, happy to take any questions that you have. Thanks again for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. And what a great way to begin this conversation on the metaverse marketing opportunities, starting with how and where the metaverse has been gaining traction. And now is really the time to make this important talk so that we can effectively walk the talk when the time evidently comes. And the audience have a lot of questions right now, and we'll try our very best to get them answered. Ben, we have a very interesting question here about how can we convince less tech-inclined consumers to jump into brand initiatives bound by the metaverse?
Well, that's always the question, at some point, should you really try to force people to go into something they don't want? At some point, what matters is understanding what people want, right? But not everyone wants the same thing. We all have different audiences and they would react differently. So what you can do is really understand where your brand audience is at, right? Don't try to force people into going into something they don't want to. That will be a definite recommendation. But use this opportunity that maybe this new platform offers to try and innovate. Because people are generally afraid of changes. They don't really like it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you give them a first, taste of it, they could actually give you some cues into, okay, this looks interesting, but I'm more looking into that kind of experience or that kind of experiences, right? So I would say, don't force anyone, but try something new and see how the people react.
Right. So this is good follow-up. A lot of consumers are still intimidated by the notion of the metaverse. Do you think brands should apply an educational and informative layer to their marketing campaigns?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that a lot of questions that will come from a lot of people, including myself, is that, what about data privacy, ownership of this data, ownership of everything that happens over there, right? I think this is something that is not yet really being discussed, right? This is something that will need to be taken at a higher level than all of us, government, organization across the world, right? But definitely, I think that showing people that they have nothing to be concerned of, that it's not really anything different from what they normally do by clicking on their phone, by clicking on a link and stuff like this, I think is extremely relevant if you actually want people to go on there. If I think about myself, I'm super excited about this, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but what really happens with everything that I do there? Does it give the brand a quicker access to what I want, what I do? It's something that we all want to know, right?
Right. Thank you so much, Ben, for answering those questions. For some unanswered questions you have for Ben, don't worry, we will invite him back at the latter part of the panel discussion. And we're so excited to move on to the next phase of the webinar. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, Jovan. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so it's my pleasure to moderate today's panel discussion, and it's truly an honor to share the floor with industry leaders from top-notch companies in the region to discover the new trends and brand expectations as we look at the future of metaverse marketing. Let me introduce to them one by one. So let me introduce first Rama Krishnan, CN, Managing Director for Southeast Asia and Metaverse Lead at Accenture Song. Rama has completed a UX design principles for AR and VR course in Emeritus. And fun fact about Rama is he is a movie buff with an OCD. That's according to him, all right? So he has specific seats earmarked in every cinema hall that he normally goes to, that he has to sit in those seats only, right? And as they have a perfect immersive viewing angle and acoustic sweet spot for him. So I wonder how many interesting movies he missed because he wasn't able to book the right seats for him. Hello, Rama.
Hello, nice to meet everyone. And yes, it's very, very critical to find the right spot for the right immersion.
I totally agree with you. And now I'm going to ask you this and actually to all the panelists as we introduce one by one. One word that would describe metaverse.
For me, the one word is here, H-E-R-E. The metaverse is here, no matter whether we like it or not, as Benjamin was talking about, but it is here.
All right, it's totally here, Rama. Okay, now let me move on to, let me introduce Amrita Malik, Vice President at HSBC. She's currently focusing on HSBC's new technologies, such as quantum computing, immersive technologies, virtual currencies, blockchain, and AI. Now, fun fact about Amrita, she likes reading Regency novels that transport her back in time and open her imagination. So she enjoys reading about kings and queens, their trials and tribulations and politics of that time. How exciting it is that you could experience or build the Regency era in a virtual world like Metaverse, right?
Yeah, true.
Right, so read the same thing, one word that would best describe Metaverse.
Possibilities.
Possibilities. Thank you so much for that, Amrita. Now, last but not the least, let me call in Chris Gurney, Group Creative Director for APAC at Virtual Worldwide. His key focus is innovating brand experiences for audiences across new media and digital content platforms. Now, the fun fact about Chris is that when he was 4 to 6 years old, he lived in the outback of central Western Australia in the middle of the desert where it was above 50 degrees in summer. And their nearest neighbor were actually 100 kilometers away. What an experience for a kid, Chris.
Hey, Jovan, thanks. Great to be here. Yeah, no, it was really it was quite harsh, and I think it made me understand a little bit more about appreciating technology because not having TV, radio, or anything like that at that age back then, when you sort of come into obviously when you move. When you're a bit older and you get access to that technology, it gives you a pretty amazing kind of understanding of what it delivers. So yeah, that was a pretty crazy time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And one word to best describe Metaverse for you?
Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know, like I think there's lots, but maybe imagination could be one.
Right, imagination. So now let us proceed with this, tapping on in the metaverse, opportunities, challenges, and pitfalls to avoid. So I'd like to ask you first, Amrita, before we deep dive into the metaverse, perhaps you can help us define the metaverse and how will the metaverse transform brands, and what do you think are the challenges and pitfalls to avoid in joining the trend?
Thanks for the question. So I think in this past 1 year, we have heard a lot about metaverse and different definitions of metaverse as well. So I'm also working actively in the space for 1 year, trying out different solutions for the bank from an innovation perspective. So the thing is, for me, it is how we are going to experience internet in the future. And as Ben also mentioned at the beginning in his presentation, that it is definitely going to impact the way that we are interacting in our personal and professional lives. So the thing is, right now also, if we see, we are in a Zoom webinar, which is 2D. We are talking in a 2D dimension. I am speaking to a lot of hundreds of people who are there in webinar, but I don't see them. They just see only the top of my head and all of you that are there in this presentation. But imagine if this discussion is happening on Moon in 3D avatar, like we in our holograms, when in our full body avatar, doing this session there. So that is where I see that the way that we are communicating is going, or the metaverse is going. So in fact, if we look at how we have transitioned, or the innovation have come in, or the technology has moved, I think before pandemic, we never thought of webinar. So webinar was not even a word that time. And right now we are talking where Chris is in some other country, I'm in India, Ram is some other country, you are hosting it from somewhere else, and your participants are also from different countries. And it has become quite normal these days that the way that we are interacting, we don't bat an eyelid before attending a webinar or hosting a webinar. So this is the next level. I see that where it will go, that we do not need to be in boxes to interact with each other. We will be there in 3D, and we will be interacting with each other. So recently I visited another innovation lab, not us, but yes, I saw that the CEO was welcoming everyone in his 3D hologram, and a life-size hologram welcoming everyone. So again, the technology is a bit expensive right now, even the hardware which was projecting the hologram, even the creating the content for that one. But yes, day in and day out, I see a lot of solutions, and I see how things are changing. Like if I, from my point of view, like what kind of solutions I saw 1 year back, and the kind of graphics, the kind of content creation, or the kind of like improvement in the hardware that I see right now, it is improving. So yes, I see that those things may be normal. Like it will be quite normal for us to talk in 3D avatars to each other. So yes, people may say, and again, in this webinar also, we cannot hang around after this discussion. So which usually we do if we go to a conference after the session is over, we hang around, we talk to each other, we go for a drinks. So those things I imagine being done when we are in a 3D virtual space where we are interacting, or in the metaverse, that even after the session is over, we can have a meaningful conversation or an interaction in there. I think this point was also touched by Ben in his presentation, that more empathy, more interaction, that will, like more human interaction that will happen in this space. Now, yes, the question I do get a lot, that why now? And yes, this concept has been there since 30 years now. The word is also not new. The imagination is not new. The concept is not new. So why we are talking about it a lot? Again, this was, I think, covered in Ben's slide as well, that the kind of investment that is happening in this space right now. So last year, 13 billion USD investment. This year, 10-folds of that, like 120 billion USD investment, and the projection is that it is going to be 5 trillion economy by 2030. So that is why, yes, we cannot afford to right now to be a bystander. Like we just cannot just see the world moving and we not doing anything, or doing any kind of active participation in that. Now, if you see big tech companies like Microsoft, even Microsoft has gone into acquisition, like it has acquired Allspace VR, which is again a VR specific community platform, Blizzard Activision, which is again a gaming platform, Meta, whatever has happened, like the stocks going down and everything, but they have not yet removed their focus from Reality Labs, which is again working on the AR VR side. So the thing is, yes, there were some questions that I saw about the wearables and all. So a lot of innovation is happening on those areas, like starting from data center, the digital content, application processor. Yes, we are not there yet, I would say, like that's what I'm seeing, that yes, we are not there yet, but the kind of progress that is happening, we cannot ignore it right now. And yes, there are existing metaverses like Roblox, which has 50 million users daily. And yes, most of them are 16, like less than 16 years of age. They may not be doing any transactions right now, but as a brand, it is good for us to be there, so that it's kind of in their conscious mind that, or unconscious mind, that they will recognize the brand, and when they start doing those financial transactions, they will recognize this brand. And it's not something new. If you have read about the Chinese, I think, electronics manufacturer here, so they created a cartoon characters in 1990s, and that was a big hit. And they ran a series for those Hair brothers, and that was kind of again putting in people's subconscious mind the brand recognition for them, so that when those kids, they started earning, those were the products they went for. So that is the whole idea, that yes, this is a new channel, this is something new, and it has mostly the Gen Zs there right now. So yes, how we can engage the customers or the new consumers, it may happen that we are engaging the existing ones, or it can be that we would be pulling new customers for our brands. So that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Amria, and for giving us the reasons why we cannot afford to be a bystander right now in relation to exploring the metaverse, right? But as we know, the metaverse is not just about technology. Creative plays a big part in the success of metaverse marketing activation. Now let's hear the opinion of a creative expert, Chris. The metaverse is believed to be the new world for creative marketing. As the APAC Group Creative Director for Virtual Worldwide, what do you think are the factors that will drive the creative economy to step into the new virtual world platform?
Yeah, I mean, look, early on, crypto art or NFT art brought a lot of creatives, globally into the mix. Yeah, I mean, they were experimenting, they were collecting, trading, and then ultimately they started creating, right? Back then, it wasn't as easy to get into. The platforms were quite tricky, getting sort of your wallet set up, getting your sort of your coins in the right sort of like currency that you sort of need to sort of work with and so on. But they kind of came in. Now the NFTs then expanded obviously from digital art into obviously all the other things that, Ben was talking about as well, from music, wearables, real estate, and pretty much, anything collectible that can be attached to a virtual or real world sort of value or reward, right? So that was sort of the interesting sort of spaces. And I, myself was in that a few years back with some people, lots of community driven stuff, lots of sort of experimenting, meeting people from all around the world with different backgrounds, different styles and so on. But I think that one of the biggest things is the creative curiosity and also the creative ego. Creatives have big egos. If you don't have one as a creative, then it's a hard place to survive. But some of the things that they'll be asking themselves is like, what can I do in this space? Yeah. What can I build? What can I flex or show off once I create it? And who can I do that to? And ultimately, kind of what can I get out of it, in terms of communities? Who am I going to be able to sort of meet, connect to? What am I going to be able to experience? And also ultimately, what rewards am I going to get? And am I able to get something from what I've created in as a monetized kind of component, or something else, even like in terms of like owning something from a DAO or from a community standpoint? And then the second thing I think ultimately is the technology. I think that's going to bring people in. Once it gets faster, once it gets cheaper, more accessible, more easy to use, there's going to be a wider creative group coming in. We're not talking about just industry creatives. My daughter's 9 years old. She sits in her bedroom and she draws, she sketches, and then she goes into like platforms, like Roblox and so on, and actually kind of connects to her community. She starts building her avatar. She starts designing her dresses and wearables and stuff like that. So we're looking at a whole mix of different creators from different age groups, different backgrounds, and different genres. So I think, yeah, the two things, they're around curiosity, creative ego, and obviously technology.
Right. I really like what you said there, creative curiosity and creative ego. Now, it's really good to understand what Amrita and Chris about the different opportunities and challenges in tapping into the metaverse marketing. So now let's talk about what consumers are saying about metaverse trends and why you should listen. So I want to go to Rama with consumers identified as the key element okay, that can bolster the Metaverse platform? What are the consumer insights you've gathered at Accenture Song and use in order to materialize your Metaverse campaigns?
Yes. So I think one of the key elements that everybody has been talking about is the profound impact that Metaverse would have. And what we believe in terms of the data points, in terms of the various researchers, it's very clear that Metaverse will profoundly affect culture, interaction, brands, and experiences all in a significant way.
Mhm.
And one of the key things that we have come across and what we also are propagating right now is the clear trend towards seeing that the impact is potentially going to be much more than what digital has an impact over the consumers. And if you take just one word, culture, and I've seen some questions on the chat group about how brands should be looking towards the metaverse, this is where actually the rubber hits the road. If anything or any trend or any medium or any piece of the ecosystem impacts culture, the brands have to make a note of that, because as we all know that culture is built around values, rituals, heroes, and symbols. And just as how Chris was talking about his daughter spending time on Roblox, her rituals, her heroes are very different from the previous generation or even the rest of the people who are not into the metaverse platforms. So we have to take cognizance of this fact. And one of the key things that we all know that currently tons of virtual goods are being exchanged, and Asia on this side of the world has the highest number of gaming community across the world. So all these have a profound impact on culture, and vis-a-vis it'll be essentially impacting the brands in a major way.
Right. And it's good to know that, the consumer insights on Metaverse. It's really amazing when you mentioned that Metaverse will impact culture, right? So now we can dig deeper into launching Metaverse marketing campaigns. How are brands doing it? So I'd like to go back to Rita. I'd like to hear from you. So you've done workshops surrounding the topic of Web3 will impact the way banks operate. In the user experience aspect, when creating marketing campaigns in the Metaverse, what are your tips for brands and agencies on how to start and deliver enhanced branding experiences?
Again, from my personal experience, different brands are different. Like as a bank, how I will approach Metaverse is going to be very different from a Gucci or a Nike. So how they are approaching, or the brands are approaching. So it is important for us to know what is our brand identity and what is it that we want to get out of this Metaverse experience. What is the goal? What is the objective? And do we want to sell product? Go there, start selling. Or do we want to just create a brand awareness? So yes, from banking perspective, if you see, I think the example was also given by Ben again. Yes, DBS has bought a land in Sandbox. We have also, HSBC also have bought a land in Sandbox. JP Morgan is there on Decentraland. So for us, it is about brand awareness right now. Yep. Just to tap into the new like Gen Z and see the new users that are there. But for a brand like IKEA, so they have got into mixed reality. They have not got into the NFT side or the blockchain side of the metaverse, but they have taken the mixed reality and have put furnitures into their users' home. Like a person do not need to visit the branch; they can those furnitures into their room. They can see how it looks and feel, and then yes, sale after that is another thing. So it makes easier for a consumer or for the user to make a decision, whether purchasing decision for that particular person. So again, if we see Tiffany recently, they did some drops, NFT drops, and they tied up some specific pendants for the NFT users. Like whoever has got the NFT, they got a specific pendant from Tiffany. So again, it depends on what is it that you want to do from marketing point of view. Is it just the brand awareness that you want to do? You want to engage with the community right now, or do you have like, yes, at the end of the day it would be ROI, how much you are investing, if you're getting that or not, and if you want to make like point of sale also there, if you want to sell your products in those channels or not. So based on that, you can choose the different elements of metaverse, I would say. Like for us, augmented reality, virtual reality, or Web3, those gaming platforms it makes sense for us to be there just to explore and see what all we can do. But yes, for some other brand, it is up to them what would make sense for them. So I think recently Nike also did some augmented reality stuff that they're selling hoodies through augmented reality and NFT. So they have combined both the elements. So yes, I think maybe Chris and Ram can add to that, like how brands are engaging in this particular space.
Right. Well, thanks for those tips, Amrita. Indeed, there are different approaches, depends on the objectives that brands can look into for metaverse campaigns. So since you mentioned about Chris, right, we've seen one of Virtue Worldwide's recent more immersive campaigns, like Coca-Cola Soul Blast. Can you tell us a bit about this campaign or your other metaverse campaigns that you've done, and how did the metaverse shape and reorient your marketing strategies for brand clients?
Yeah, I mean, this year we've developed quite a few Web3 NFT specific sort of projects for the likes of Unilever, Diageo, but obviously the biggest one and the most recent one we just launched was Soul Blast, which is the fourth drop by us for the Coca-Cola Creations platform. So obviously the Coke Creations platform itself is a limited edition sort of flavor drop that utilizes really unique innovations and unexpected collaborations. And it's really centered around putting Coca-Cola at the cutting edge of culture and driving relevance and engagement with Gen Z, something Ram was talking about as well. So that platform, really is about, focusing on themes that are relevant, that are going to culturally fit with those target audiences. And then what we came sort of into to help sort of deliver is the actual creative, obviously the insight, the creative, and then also kind of the experience behind all of that. So anime was obviously linked to Soul Blast, and it's got a very strong narrative around self-exploration. And so for Gen Z, it was all about sort of unlocking that energizing kind of possibility, sort of to get people to understand, that they can explore the world around them and they can find that sort of a bit of their own identity in doing that and have fun as well. So, knowing that obviously, this part of the world is the biggest hub where the biggest fans are, and obviously inspired by this whole kind of fandom. Coke partnered with Bleach, which is a Japanese anime. It's been on hiatus for 10 years. But it was returning from that 10-year break. And it's the final kind of season that all the fans have been waiting for. So there was a lot of kind of built up excitement that was already there. So the concept of that actually story is literally about, a young teenager who discovers that he's actually part kind of, he's got kind of a mother and a father that have sort of superpowers, and he goes off and fights all these sort of demons and other world sort of monsters. And that is about his journey of discovery and of who he really is. So that was our connection back strategically to obviously the Gen Z component. And what we really did was we took that and we kind of created, alongside all the sort of weight and the anticipation for the launch, we went off and created like a whole bunch of kind of sort of creative work and content with influencers for pre-unboxing. We went and did a whole bunch of content, social content that sort of delivered some really interesting kind of ways to show how, obviously this sort of anime version of what we were delivering was true to the show. We weren't allowed, one of the challenges was that from the IP standpoint, we weren't given assets. We had to create everything from scratch. So, obviously across all the different types of content and social, and plus obviously the AR game that was developed, everything was created from scratch. So we had some amazing partners. And what it was really all about was getting the power into the hands of the fans through the actual game. In the series itself, the power comes from the swords of the characters, where it sort of unleashes this blast, which is called a bankai. So the Soul Blast was our interpretation of those assets coming to life, that you could actually kind of scan your can, and that would really bring it to life. So I said it was a really interesting way of kind of connecting that cultural sort of point with the fans first, and not kind of just slapping graphics on a can and slapping, content and branding all over the place. It was really about looking deep into the insight and really bringing that to life, across those different areas for the fans to engage in. And as I said, it's been a really big kind of success across the other drops that we've done for the creations platform for Coke.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. It's really interesting to know that what you've done, with Coca-Cola. And it's really good that brands like HSBC and Coca-Cola are leading the way into the metaverse marketing campaign. So this brings us to another point we want to tackle in this panel today. So what brands can expect in metaverse marketing this upcoming 2023 and beyond. And Amrita, you are now adopting new capabilities from the metaverse. Consumers may expect new offerings and services this 2023. What are financial institutions doing to meet the trends and developments in the metaverse?
For the banks, we have already started exploring and experimenting in the space. So for 2023, I see that yes, if metaverse or any other trends, new trends that is coming up is not there in the marketing strategy, then it should be like some percentage of the budget is always a challenge, should be there in the marketing strategy, that yes, this much is going to be there to try out different things that is coming up. Again, I see it's enhancements or kind of work that is happening in this space. So 2023 is going to be again exciting. A lot of campaigns are going to go live in there. And in fact, you will see a lot of buzz from us as well in 2023. But the thing is, yes, so for all the brands, they should have certain amount that, yes, we have this much risk appetite, we can invest this much without going overboard into this particular space.
Thanks so much, Amrita. Now let me go back to Rama. Right. So I would like to ask about your thoughts on metaverse marketing this coming 2023. So for future forward companies, technological innovations are becoming the building blocks of marketing strategies and campaigns as we move towards the future of the internet. Right. So why should brands keep up? And what fresh and imaginative metaverse activations can they look forward to this coming 2023?
Awesome. So one of the key things that I always reiterate to anybody I meet regarding this topic is that the business that they are in, or the brands, they're racing towards a future which is very different from where they have been designed to operate in. So currently, because of that very fact, they need to experiment. And just like how Amrita was saying, that we need to experiment, and we would encourage people to experiment so that they can recraft the way and recraft the business models, recraft the whole structure of brand towards this future, which is currently being formed as we speak. So one of the key things, apart from, there could be many ways in which you can slice the opportunity, but I feel that one very important aspect, which we all should understand and take into cognizance, is the fact that any metaverse experience should be physical plus virtual, or phygital, or what I like to call a vert-real, or it's virtual plus real. It's not just a fully virtual or a experience, but it should be in between, because it should capitalize on the real world tangibility, the whole tactile feeling, and overlay the metaverse experience on top of it. And this is something which is very important, so that we are able to see the whole, the full gamut and the full overlay of augmentation of information, augmentation of entertainment, augmentation of commerce onto the real world, and take advantage of it. And one example I would like to give you, just because, and I'm doing it just because Chris talked about Coca-Cola, is that for Pepsi, we essentially took a slightly different route, wherein instead of NFT drops and instead of doing that route from an ownership perspective, we actually went back to the roots of what Pepsi does. It is essentially giving Gen Z's entertainment right where they want it. So we basically launched the first concert on a bottle. So anybody who would buy the latest, the new product that was getting launched, a new flavor, you could only watch that concert on the wrapper of the bottle. And that you could buy it off the shelf, use a simple augmented reality web application, no need to download an application. It's based on web browser, and watch that exclusive concert on the wrapper. And obviously this had a huge buzz and a huge impact. And this is something that Pepsi had done very recently. And now we are going on to the next phases of it. So yeah, please be experimental. Please try to activate all the senses, including the physical, as far as possible.
Right. I really like what you said there, Rama. The metaverse is a marriage of virtual and on ground. And this is really something that we have to look forward to. So Chris, is this something that you agreed to, marrying virtual and on ground to create the best metaverse experience? And as a follow-up from your perspective, what would be metaverse trends we can expect for the coming year?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's some interesting, I guess, sort of experiences where we've seen in the past and what we've been working on as well, where it's a combination of both. And I believe that, you'll see more of that, or you'll see kind of different technology come into place that will kind of make that heightened. There's some incredible stuff happening now, with virtual looking devices that are actually creating kind of, 3D holographic kind of real-time images for use in healthcare, for use in art, and all those sorts of things where you don't actually have to wear anything, but it's still running through a system that's delivering that as kind of a virtual type of kind of experience. But yeah, no, I think having the two always helps. And, I think a lot of the stuff that we've been working on in the past and recently is trying to look at what is the next thing and how can we kind of create, again, something interesting from that cultural point of view. And obviously, the metaverse in itself is currently going under a lot of rapid changes for creators, for technology, and how brands can kind of fit into that is an opportunity for us. And I think Ram was saying it as well, to run experiments, to be experimental, to engage early with audiences, because this is where we can really develop our hypothesis for this long-term strategy. There's been a big adoption of metaverse technologies for virtual goods, and we know that they're actually becoming even more kind of sought after than we thought. We run a virtual screenware paper. I can send a link to the group if they want to have a look at it. But we sort of found some really interesting numbers on this around like this positive perception of the metaverse around 80%, and in the high 70s sort of percentage sort of range about expecting to engage with metaverse related brand or platform in the next 12 months, actively sort of using virtual reality or augmented reality or digital currency are also kind of actually kind of positively kind of up there with that sort of report as well in terms of numbers. So again, combination of that interest and that positive play, I think is going to continue to bring more interesting kind of evolving kind of experiences for audiences. If I think of the trends, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff. I think sustainability is going to be a big thing. I think that DBS example is a really good one. I think one of the things that we're looking at now in terms of how we work with brands as well is looking at the footprint of certain kind of things that brands are doing. A couple of years ago, there was a campaign or actually a piece done by our Virtues Futures team. And they did a thing which was based on, looking at the footprint for the clothing industry. So then they started looking at virtual wearables and brought to the attention to the youth the fact that, there is an issue, there is an environmental concern around that waste. So, I think a lot of the stuff around that is going to be, again, sustainability kind of led. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some more stuff in the space that we can kind of adapt across new technologies that we might not even have scratch the surface yet with. But yeah, happy to send that report over to whoever wants to see it. And yeah, throw me back any questions. Love to chat more. I know we're sort of running a bit over time. So
well, thank you so much, panelists. What an insightful discussion that we just had there. So, but we're not done yet. Okay, I would like to call Ben back to join us in this session. Hello, Ben. He's come back. All right, great. So,
I'm back.
Okay, great. So I'm now giving the floor to our audience. So we have some questions here. This is a question to Amrita, and it's from Romina from Praxis Marketing Consultancy, and Jayashri Ravindra also asked this, right? So would MSMEs, have the chance to truly against the big brands with the budget? Is metaverse only relevant for big brands, or can startups with limited budget benefit as well?
They can do. I think also Chris was mentioning, I think he has also mentioned in the chat that the entry is not that expensive. It depends. Like if you have a certain budget, you can plan the experience based on that. And again, you can try out different experiences. Maybe augmented reality would suit you, maybe virtual reality, maybe NFT drop or Web3 on the blockchain. Like, yes, if you're planning to buy a land, that may be expensive, that may not be done may not be afforded by the budget that you have in mind. But yes, if you want to just create a experience, or if you can also partner with other companies, and you can do a kind of joined up experience as well. I think if you have seen last week or 2 weeks back, we did one. HSBC also did with Rugby 7. And we created that experience in Sandbox. So it is not necessarily that you have to do it. Maybe you can partner with someone that aligns with your vision, with your goals, and you can do it there.
Right. So find a partner, right? Find a partner. Yeah. Right. So Chris, we have a question here. So from an infrastructure perspective, what do you think should countries in Asia Pacific focus on to encourage speedy adoption and growth of the metaverse in the region?
Oh, that's a great question. Look, I think it comes at the base level of having people, bringing people in who can be educated and who can be trained on specifically understanding what they can actually kind of offer brands. So, you know, I would even go back to sort of the education systems and looking at how countries can start to kind of understand that this is actually a really big future kind of area of potential growth. I mean, we've had everybody talking about numbers, you know, in the presentation in the trillions, right? So from a government, from an education level, from an in kind of office situation, I'd be sort of doing it from the ground layer and having that bedrock of sort of, you know, really sort of developing the skills needed and bringing in sort of, I guess, the training to get those people that would actually be the future generation to be building these different types of experiences and areas around Web3 and Metaverse. That would be kind of where I would start. Yeah, where I kind of really focus my my energy on.
All right. Okay, good. So this question is for Ben. Sophisticated spaces like the Metaverse get a bad rap that is only meant for Gen Zs. Okay. So for brands that are also target millennials and older consumers, how can they get the best of the Metaverse and still be relevant to their consumer base?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a very good question. The assumption there is that younger people, maybe the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha, you know, because it goes back to Alpha, and they're going to be live in 1 or 2, 3 years, right? Are more used to those experiences, right? It's part of their life. Now, being myself a millennial, right? I don't think that I'm that far remote from, you know, the possibilities or at least the willingness to be taking into new experiences. And I think that's what brands, you know, should always consider is that competition is everywhere. It's global now, and COVID only increased that for some of them. And being able to actually provide something that would make you look different is what people are looking for. But let's not forget that it needs to connect in the way that we expect it to be, right? We want it to be personalized. We want it to be relevant. We want it to be authentic today, right? And so I think that's the main thing. It's at the moment, the communities are, yes, maybe not the target audience of a lot of brands, but that doesn't mean that their regular repeated customers and consumers wouldn't join if provided with the right experience.
All right, thanks for that. Rama, this is for you. This is a question from Yip Hong Wong. How fast do you think the Metaverse can be normalized in Asian countries?
That's a very great question. And I'm sure that there are tons of people who are working towards looking for that answer. As far as I can say that one thing is for sure, that Asia will lead this adoption cycle for sure. And how fast, it's anybody's guess, but I would say that we should definitely look at 2025 as a tipping point towards this adoption, and up to 2030, where most of the numbers are hitting essentially an inflection point when it comes to adoption. So yes, 2025 is where I am personally very clued in based on all the data points that we are seeing.
Right. Okay. So we should definitely start now, right?
It is high time. Yes. We have only a 2.5 years to make sure that we are still ahead of the curve. Anybody.
Right. Absolutely. So I'll go back again to Amrita. So do you think there is a specific industry that stands to gain the most or gets the most upper hand from the Metaverse space, aside from the gaming space, of course?
No, right now it looks like, yes, everybody has joined and everybody is trying to explore and see what is in it for them in this particular space. I don't see any particular industry leading it, but yeah, what I see that in future, like content creators and influencers we do have in YouTube and like platforms like YouTube and different social medias, that would be like a bit different and more immersive in this environment. And those are the ones who have already started building content in this space. So they are the one who would make people stay in the metaverse, I would say.
Right. Thanks for that. Well, I have this question to Chris. Okay, Metaverse in itself is brimming with innovation and creativity. Is there a specific strategy that brands must go for to stand out in the space, such as muting down their campaigns to mesh well with the environment?
I think, you know, at a brand level, I think it's all about understanding, you know, what are the sort of the cultural points that they want to kind of, you know, attach themselves to. What are they going to what are they going to give as an authentic promise, or what's their product offering that's going to be done in an authentic way. And I think one of the things is really, because again, what we sort of always deliver with brands is about like culture first. You know, what is that area that is really going to resonate from what your brand is giving to your audience in the most authentic way. So I wouldn't go into a space just because another brand's in there. I wouldn't go into a space just because there's a lot of, you know, obviously a lot of noise, or, you know, there's a lot of interest around what's happening because someone else is in there doing something. I think I'd find, you know, my own audience and curate what that would be for them, you know, in terms of what that, I guess, really, really authentic kind of way of communicating and connecting with them would be, and get a great partner. As I said, like, you know, this is why we're here. This is why, you know, the other brands and other agencies are around, and the platforms, because we can help deliver that sort of for you as well. Understanding who that is really important.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks so much, guys, for all of your insights. And to wrap up this discussion, we also want to hear from the speakers about what is the top advice that you have for brands who would like to look into the metaverse space. So let's start with Rama, your top advice.
So I'll repeat. Essentially, the topmost advice I will give is that we need to be experimenting with an intent. So I saw one very interesting question about how does it pan out with the brand agencies relationships. I would say that increasingly, because there's no playbook to this yet, we are crafting the processes, we are crafting the governance, we are crafting so many structures as we are moving towards the timeline. It is very critical that the experimentations are done with an intent, and the intent should be long-term and not treated just like a one-off gimmick, which has been, not saying that it was bad a few years ago, but it is very critical that we treat it with a long-term strategy, because this is not going away no matter what anyone says.
Right. Thanks for that, Rama. And Rita, your top advice for brands.
Yes, again, I'll go with Rama, experiment, and yes, finding the right partner. Now, if you see a World Economic Forum, the Metaverse Standard Forum, that group that is there, that has around 2,000 plus companies who have registered and are working in that space. So some may be genuine, have a genuine solution, and some may be just doing something because it's a hype right now. So when you are finding a partner, find the right one who has have done some credible jobs in the past and can guide you with your journey.
Right. Thanks for that, Amrita. And Chris?
I think it's been covered. I think, you know, partnership and experimentation, it's a key, and authenticity. And I think finding those and having the right balance is critical. I think you just can't jump in blind. You know, I've probably seen quite a number of brands that have jumped in. Maybe it hasn't really kind of been the most effective use of what they've done. Sometimes that can backfire. Sometimes it can leave a negative kind of sentiment amongst the community there. And if you do that once, it can be a long-lasting effect. So, you know, my kind of advice would be, get a good partner, don't rush in, think about it properly, and think who you really want to connect to and what you're going to offer them in the most authentic manner that you can.
All right. Thanks for that, Chris. And lastly, Ben?
Yeah, of course, you know, what's been just shared, but I would say people generally experience, you know, a fear of losing, right? It's not because people are talking about it that much that you see project that you necessarily need to be there. You can wait a bit, right? And then, but if you decide to go, right, I would recommend not to compromise on your brand values and your brand purpose, right? Because bottom line, this is what makes a whole as a brand, and this is what makes customers and consumers come back to us regularly.
Right. So thank you so much to all of our speakers, Ben, Rama, Amrita, and Chris. Thank you for sharing and for being so generous with your time and with your insights. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So we began the discussion with the goal of discovering the different challenges and opportunities in the metaverse that await brands and agencies as we enter the new year filled with new trends. I am sure our audience looking to adopt the virtual space is more than excited to explore the opportunities we've talked about and confident to face the new phase of Metaverse Marketing Activations, as well as seeing the metaverse a significant component and platform for marketing strategies. So as we conclude this webinar, we would like to thank our partner, Talkwalker, right? So thank you so much for your support, Talkwalker. Thank you, everyone. Once again, I'm Joven. Keep evolving. Bye.